In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, you are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I am Sheriff James Brody.
And I'm David Quint Lee.
And I am Bridget Hooper Freiler. And we're looking at Jaws, directed by a very young, up-and-coming Steven Spielberg, and starring Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, and of course, Bruce the Mechanical Shark.
Is Brucey.
Love Bruce.
So a little summary. Jaws is based on the 1974 novel by Peter Benchley, and it stars Rob Schneider as the police chief.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Hold on. No, Roy Scheider. Okay. I watched the wrong movie. Hold on. Give me 2 hours. Okay. So Chief Brody, with the help of a marine biologist, Hooper, and a professional shark hunter, Ahab, or Quint, I guess, they embark on a perilous hunt for a man-eating great white shark. And that has caused the death of several beachgoers at the summer resort town of Amity, which is in New England.
Yeah, and possibly one dog, but we'll talk about that later.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys knew or realized how much of a watershed in motion picture history this was. Did you guys know that before this episode or going into this episode?
Yeah, I was vaguely aware that this was a big deal of a movie many years ago. And then when I finally got around to seeing it, I said, that did not disappoint. A lot of movies that are really highly acclaimed, I find, are just, they're not always my speed. But I thought this one was very well deserved in terms of its praise. Bridget, you essentially forced your way onto this episode. Just kidding. She bartered her way onto the boat. And so I'm guessing you have a history with this movie as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the history and the trivia of what was going on behind the scenes with this movie. Certainly, I'm not an expert or anything, but it's hard to be a fan of this movie of any kind and not know some of the details of what went into the making of this one. It's the making of Jaws could be a movie in and of itself. So yeah, what a fun story behind the story with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know there's a musical called Bruce that actually is about the making of Jaws?
I did not know that, no.
It's like a person in a shark suit, like on stage. Oh, I would love to see that. We should review that too. But I do recall that it's the very first blockbuster. It's an expression that we use all the time now to describe big summer hit movies. And if I'm not mistaken, the idea was that the lines at the theater stretched all the way around the block. And so that's why we call it blockbuster, not because of the video rental store. May it rest in peace.
Too soon. Yeah, this and Star Wars changed the landscape. It's hard to... Can you guys even imagine that there was a time when summer was the January? Summer was the dumping ground for movies.
Wow.
Until Jaws.
I wonder, why that would be. Is that just because people were traveling so much or something?
Yeah, summertime was for camping and traveling. People going outside. I know people don't do that anymore, but summer was not the choice spot for movies until this one got everybody excited and kind of changed everything.
Which is wild to me because, again, the drive-in was the season 60s, iconic. It seems like summer should have been tied to movies just for climate reasons, if nothing else, sitting in your car to watch a movie. But
I'd have to look up the history on that. Maybe drive-ins were an attempt to try to get some summer revenue.
Good question.
There's more history to be figured out there. We've only scratched the surface.
Exactly.
So. Yeah.
Let's talk about, I think it's probably going to be kind of a no-brainer, but I guess we have to talk about our popcorn ratings and whether we thought this movie was stale, fresh, or buttered and salted. I mean,
trash.
Is anybody going to dispute buttered and salted?
I won't.
I fought with you the last time, James. I'm not going to do it this time.
All right. So you're there then, right?
I'm there. Yep. Absolutely.
Right. We're on the same page. Buttered and salted. Excellent movie. And I think we're saving our reasons till later, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. Okay. But just because a movie has taken our heart in the buttered and salted variety doesn't mean that the theology is necessarily deep waters, as it were. So if we were comparing Jaws to soda, or I guess we could have just used the ocean, would we say it's diluted, carbonated, or is the ocean running over? I'm going to say, I'll make the case first just to say it there. It's very easy to say, I love the movie, so its cup runneth over. I think it's in some ways a very simple film, and I don't mean simple in a bad way, because theologically we could even say in one sense God is simple. We won't run down that theological rabbit trail right now, but simplicity is a part of his nature. So simplicity, I think, is part of this movie as well. So I think there's great themes, but I would only say carbonated. It's great themes, but it's not It's not like The Matrix where you could just spend hours running down rabbit trails. What about you guys?
I would 100% agree. Yeah, I think rabbit trails don't really lend themselves to this movie. I mean, at its core, it is a straightforward plot, which is one of the great things about it. And in terms of the characters, there's enough depth for great discussion, but it doesn't unfold, in my experience, layer upon layer the way that many other movies do. Bridget, do you want to tell us why we're wrong about that?
Actually, well, no, I don't, but I'll tell you this. I personally, and I'll talk more about this when we get into our theological talking points, but I had a much harder time coming up with theological talking points for this movie than I thought I was going into it. When I joined the episode, when I forced my way in, I was like, oh, this is great. It's Jaws. There's just going to be so much to say. And then I sat down yesterday and rewatched the movie. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So I think if it were just me trying to talk to someone else, I would actually, in my own power, say that this movie is diluted in theological talking points. But because this is going to be a group effort and I'm going to definitely ride on both of your coattails, that's what will get it to carbonated. So I'm grateful for the experience to get to hear what both of you have to say about this one as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree. Sometimes I want to like change my ranking by the end of the episode. I'm like, hold on now. Excellent.
Well, before we get to the movie and spoilers, we're kind of all on the same page. We don't have the dissenter.
We're all in the same boat.
Really. But,
yeah.
Yeah. So before we get to it, we want to encourage everybody to like and share this episode with your friends, or just run up and down the beach yelling hysterically, "Get into the podcast! Everybody into the podcast!" Right? So just share it and let people know.
We're diving into this theme here. And if you want to hear more, make sure you hunt and harpoon us on YouTube and hook a barrel on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Discord, so you'll never lose sight of us.
That's right.
3 barrels, we're not going down.
Not going down. That's right. 10 years, 3 barrels. One quick way that you can help keep the podcast afloat is by giving us just a quick rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That's where most people listen, but also Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you listen. 5 stars, some kind words. Helps boost us in the algorithms, helps get the word out. Or you can also support us financially through Patreon if you want. It's not $3,000 that we're requesting there.
That's right. Yeah, donating a few dollars a month will make you a patron saint, give you special access to a whole host of exclusive benefits, including our Facebook group and channel on our Discord server, voting on future episodes, and for our premium seating members, you get some in the lobby podcast episodes and can join us live while we record. You get the head, you get the tail, you get the whole darn thing. And speaking of what you get, you can also get merch from our merch store. Just check out popcorntheology.com. Unfortunately, we don't have this awesome Amity pail, which I have.
That's awesome.
For all the beachgoers, make some sandcastles and things. So we're going to run some ads. We'll submerge just long enough to let those happen. And then we'll breach some spoilers and get into the deeper themes of Jaws.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane!
Cinemagog, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere. So I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagog book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagog, The Marvel Us Era. Now available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions.
Hey, this is David, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's probably because you're interested in theology or movies, or best of all, both. And that means that you're our kind of people, sharing common interests with our listeners and viewers as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's a big part of what we're all about here. So for more information on advertising with us, contact feedback@popcorntheology.com.
And we're back, taking a big bite into spoiler territory as we dive deeper into Jaws. Here it is, time for our popcorn thoughts. All right, but some quick questions as we sort of delve into the fun stuff. We talked a little bit about background with Jaws. I'm curious from you guys, have you seen any of the others, or has it prompted you? Do you have a taste for other shark movies? Where are you at with Jaws and his friends?
Bridget?
Well, I'm not above watching a shark movie from time to time.
Shark Week?
Well, Shark Week, yes. Actually just indulged in some of that with my nephew a few weeks ago. So that was fun. I may have gotten sucked into Deep Blue Sea on TV.
Yes. That's a personal guilty pleasure.
The Meg. I think there was another one that had, I don't know, one of the really popular girls. It might have been the Blake Lively one. I don't know. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, The Shallows, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do like a good natural disaster movie, I guess, for, lack of a better term right now. So yes, I'm not an expert there. It's not like it's my favorite genre, but I do watch them from time to time.
But no Jaws 2, 3, or
Revenge?
No.
I was 17
David?
or whatever it was, and Back to the Future too. It's occurring to me now, just hearing you guys rattle those off. So one, no, I didn't bother watching 2 or 3. I thought about it, and I watched the trailers for them. I thought maybe I could do some homework for this episode, and then I was like, no, I can't bring myself to do that. Much like Michael Caine, I have not seen Jaws 4, but
I will stand by 2. Not as good as the first one, but a quality film, because it's the only one that follows Brody, Roy Scheider's character, and it is an interesting follow-up, and it doesn't have just the crazy conceit of the others. It's just, okay, one showed up, so of course maybe if some are straying into the waters, it could make sense that there would be another of this breed or species. So it kind of makes sense, and there's a little bit more to be explored with his character and the town that I think is worthwhile. Kat and I just rewatched it again, so it's the one I recommend.
Yeah,
not saying it's equal, but if you like some of these types of movies, and like Bridget, it's worth a watch just because it's good. It's just not great.
Good, not great. Yeah, okay. Maybe I should have checked that one out. You know what I'm wishing that they had done, because as I understand it, beginning with 3, Roy Scheider was just like, I'm out. Like, no, I'm not doing it. And they probably just
3. The young Dennis Quaid plays his son grown up.
Wild.
But it's at SeaWorld.
But you know what they should have done is they've just replaced him with Rob Schneider at that point. I mean, I know he would have been like 20 or 15 or something.
Let it go.
Yeah.
No Rob Schneider.
Ah, doggone it. But no, it's funny. As you listed all those other shark movies, I'm just realizing I don't think I've ever seen another shark movie. I'm sure there's something, but to my memory right now, I can't think of any. And it's never been an intentional thing, but I think there may be a subconscious reason, which is that I do have a bit of thalassophobia. You guys know what that is?
Fear of sharks, fear of deep water,
fear of the water, fear of the ocean, fear of the open ocean. And I think that's an incredibly rational fear, but that's just me. So I can relate a little bit to Brody in this. And so, maybe there's part of me that's just like, that doesn't sound relaxing to me at all.
Yeah.
But James, I'm guessing
Deep Blue Sea viewing, David. That's your assignment.
Well, that's the thing. I want to watch the Meg. I just haven't gotten around to them. So one of these days.
The Meg, you can watch the Meg regardless of any phobias you have, because there's nothing in the Meg.
It's not based in reality. Yeah.
Well, and Deep Blue Sea is about sharks that have been experimented on, and they actually can think, and they're at a facility. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have the same problems.
None of it keeps me awake at night. I'm not in the ocean. I'm just saying that, like, I think subconsciously part of me is like, I don't want to watch that. But James, I'm sure you've seen them all, yeah?
Samuel Jackson and his speech, that's all I'm going to say, are worth the price of admission.
Okay. Yeah. He's always worth watching. He's always worth watching.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you've seen all the Jaws movies. James, did you torture yourself with 3 and 4?
Yeah, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I watched all of them, and I've never gone back because they were not good.
Yeah, fair enough.
1 and 2 kind of make a nice look at Brody's life, and that's good enough for me. My question to you guys, though, about this movie: what's the consensus on what happened to Pippet?
The dog?
Pippet the dog.
I thought it was Pippin.
Pippin. Maybe
Pippin. It's. Well, I had a dog named Pippin, so I don't know who this one was. I mean, the dog's there, and then all of a sudden it's not. There's like a bone or whatever chew toy floating.
Stick.
Yeah, but we don't see like a shocking amount of blood, which usually is what happens in this. I don't know.
There's 2 camps, Bridget. Eaten or not eaten?
I think he's eaten. Never
How are their
seen
camps on
evidence
this?
to the contrary, but I'm willing to be convinced because I would love for that to not be the case.
Do we ever
So
see the dog later? I can't imagine this.
We never see the dog later, but we also never see his owner later. So maybe we just don't know. I think there's people that really love dogs that want to believe this. The film doesn't give us any evidence, but science would say sharks usually get a prey and it's usually a while before they eat again. And so Pippet disappears, but it's only a few minutes later that Alex gets attacked. So I'm just saying, the dog might be fine. He might have just wandered down, swam a little down the beach further, and then come out on the sand.
It's a little dog, it could be like a little appetizer, and it's a big shark.
We want to know in the comments.
Yeah, tell us.
Who believes that the dog lived and who thinks the dog died. This is very important to some people.
Well, for many people, the dog, a person dying, snooze in a movie. But a dog dying is just, and to be fair, most movies, if a dog dies, they make it the most heartbreaking scene. But, it's a dog.
That's right. All right. So we all thought it was buttered and salted. Bridget, why is it for you? And was there anything you didn't like, or what was standout moments for you?
Well, I'm gonna save some of my favorite standout moments because I think we're gonna get into those a little bit more in the theology talking point section.
Okay.
But just a couple of things that beyond my favorite scenes in the movie that stand out. I think you had mentioned this earlier, James, that it's funny to me that this is the kind of movie that you can say about it that they just don't make them like this anymore. But also, it's so simplistic in its storytelling. So ironically, that should mean that it should be easy to duplicate, right? But nowadays, everything has to be bigger and it has to be bloodier and it has to be less realistic and more CGI'd. And I know we have Mechanical Bruce there doing the heavy lifting as the shark, but it feels real. Like, that's the thing about this movie. He feels real. He looks real. And you work the cameras at just the right angles to get the blood and everything. And it looks like a shark. But nowadays, we just don't do it that way anymore. And I think another irony of this movie is that most sharks don't behave like this one does, right? Like, this is not real shark behavior, and everybody knows that, yet it is still the realism of the situation that keeps us glued to our seats and watching our screens and terrified of the water. We know that this is not typical, but it feels real. There's just something powerful about the simplicity of this movie, the way it's shot, the emotions that it drums up, the way that it relies on a 2-note score. Even that is very simple, but look what it did for scores for movies. It changed everything. So yeah, it's just incredible in terms of what it accomplished. I think the suspense moments in this movie are just unrivaled in other films. And I would offer a moment in this movie, and I'd be curious to hear what both of you think about it. I think one of the scariest moments in this entire movie for me is at the very beginning, the very first time Chrissy gets pulled under. And it's just that tiny little blip. It happens so quickly. But all you see is just her head gets pulled back and her body goes under the water. And you see the water cover her head for just a split second. And then she's right back up. But I don't know who the actress is who played that girl. But my goodness, her performance just in those few moments she has on the screen, she did an amazing job. Like just the sheer terror and panic. And you can tell she's physically in pain and also trying to figure out what just happened, what is going on, and also the helplessness and hopelessness of the situation she's in. All of those things are on her face. So that actress, my goodness, incredible job.
I might mention, Bridget, I think some of that was probably aided by the fact that I think the rig actually was pulling on her pretty hard to move her in the the water back and forth.
Really?
Yeah. Some of the pain might have been very naturalistic because the pain was real.
I wondered how because they get yanked around side to side a lot when they get eaten. I'm like, that looks uncomfortable. There's no way they're just swimming, they're not winging there. Right. Man.
Yeah. So I think that moment is just amazing. And just really quickly, too, one of my favorite filmmaking elements of this movie, too, I was noticing on this rewatch how many different times in this movie there are multiple conversations happening at the same time. And I actually love that. I think if it's not done well, it could get really frustrating if you feel like you're supposed to be listening to two different things and you can't quite make out what anybody is saying. But they edited the sound, I think, well enough that you can focus in on the person you're supposed to be listening to. But there are all those ambient conversations. There are people talking over each other. Even the scene when Brody and Hooper are trying to convince the mayor to shut down the beaches, they're both trying to make the same point and they're yelling over each other to make the same point. And I think there's love. It's like controlled chaos. even just in the way that the dialogue is performed in this movie, which I think is symbolic of the chaos that's happening around them in nature as well. So I just think that that's a really, really cool element of all of this. So
yeah.
And then just a couple of quick fun facts. I think if anybody doesn't know, Bruce in Finding Nemo is named after Bruce the mechanical shark in this movie. So I just think that's so fun.
Oh, was that his father? Because I know that in Nemo he says, I never knew my father.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that connection. That's great.
Got all the way to Australia somehow, but yeah.
Just to emphasize the point that came up in this week's In the Lobby episode too, Jaws is rated PG.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to say really fast is that this is one example, I think, of, I don't know if you both have read the book or if either of you has read the book, but the movie is way better than the book. And I'm an English teacher, so I get to say that, but the movie is way better on this one.
I was thinking about that earlier because I didn't even know it was based on a book until we prepped for this episode. And everyone always says the book's better about everything. And I'm thinking, I think those people just like books better than movies. And I'm wondering, I know the Jurassic Park book is good, but I think the Jurassic Park film is great. And I'm trying to think of other examples where the movie is better than the book.
Stardust.
What's that? Stardust?
Stardust. Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
I think, personally.
Yeah, I'm
not sure I agree on Jurassic Park, but...
Really?
Okay.
You prefer the book, huh?
Yeah. The book is darker.
The book is a lot darker.
Yeah.
The book would have scarred me as a kid instead of
darker.
inspiring me as a kid like the movie did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned the PG rating because if I understand correctly, there was no PG-13 rating until like Temple of Doom, right? 1980 something.
Yeah.
And so that was the first PG-13 movie. And so in this case, I mean, it wasn't horrible, I guess. I don't know what it would have been required to make it an R rating.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because in rewatching it this time, I'm like, this is a much more graphic movie than I had remembered.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of, the opening scene, but like the people getting eaten by the shark it's pretty graphic stuff. And looking through pictures of real shark bites, I assume real shark attacks, I was like, this is pretty heavy stuff. And it's PG and people were bringing their young children to see it.
Yeah.
Well, Raiders of the Lost Ark actually does get a little bit bloody and people's faces get melted off. And so I think that something was happened right around the turn of the 70s, 80s, probably the emergence of the blockbuster and people taking their kids to all the summer movies. Yeah, it sort of developed the rating system at that. I'm surprised they haven't sort of post-retroactively made it PG-13 or something. But, that's just kind of funny that it's there. Totally agree too. By the way, my car is also named Bruce with a nice little. It has some Jaws decals on it. On the back, the license plate is framed with Quint's.
That's awesome. I love that.
Does it? So it's the orca. No, it's named Bruce. Does it randomly break down and start spazzing out on you?
Not yet. That was probably a bad choice now. You think about it.
Just don't get in high-speed chases. You'll be fine.
It works great on the land, but when you put it in the water, not so much. Yeah.
To your point, Bridget, about they don't make them like this anymore. Like I think that absolutely applies to the dialogue and the writing, like you were talking about. People talk a very natural, like not just talking over each other, but nobody's saying a lot of stylized phrases or the way Whedonization and sort of James Gunn style writing has influenced even dramas. Sometimes people, they don't talk in a naturalistic way. They talk as if this is obviously interesting scripted dialogue.
They talk like they're in a movie.
Yeah. And this movie doesn't feel like that at all. People are just talking. There's nothing super eloquent about many of the phrases. So occasionally somebody has a good turn of phrase or a moment where the soliloquy is kind of interesting, but it's just a lot of the way people would talk in normal life. And I think that makes it way better in a lot of ways.
Yep.
David, what about you? What stood out for you beyond stuff we've already chatted about?
I was going to say, there's so much to this. And Bridget, you raised some really great points. I think for me, what it is, especially on this viewing, it is such a focused story. I mean, to the point where the second half could essentially be a play. It's three guys on a boat against a shark. I mean, it's almost Moby Dick. It's almost Old Man in the Sea in terms of its concise. Well, I haven't read Moby Dick, but in terms of the focused nature, obviously all of the setup that leads up to that. But even that, there's no fluff. There's no additional storylines. There's no characters that you could cut. It is all necessary, and it's all compelling. It's just really well.
Except maybe for the guy complaining about the kids karate chopping his fence. But I love that guy, so don't cut him out.
Don't cut him out. But I thought as well, when you put three guys on a boat and they have to carry the weight of this movie. You couldn't have chosen 3 better actors, 3 more compelling characters with such great chemistry between them. And then, like you said, the suspense was incredibly well earned. I mean, the fact that you see the shark, James probably knows this. Do you know how many minutes of screen time? Like 2, right? Like 3 or 4, maybe. Not much.
Yeah. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, it's so minimal.
Someone let us know in the comments, because I don't feel like looking it up. But not very much screen time in the movie. But that doesn't matter, because you know there's a shark. There is the suspense that's built up by its absence. And that's where I'm guessing these sequels and so many other movies just drop the ball, because you just don't, you see too much. And so the suspense is not built. And the payoff is well worth it in this. There's, I think, like 3 or 4 Chekhov's rifles in this movie. And for those who don't know, the idea is if you put a rifle on the stage in the first act, it has to fire by the end of the play. You get some of those in this movie. But ultimately, that second half is men that are forged in the fire, right? In trial. And I love, especially on this viewing, Quint and Hooper, because they start out just at each other's throats. And by the end, they're comparing scars. They're like, anyway, Hooper's just the best. I think he's my favorite character in this. The dynamic is just the best. And so it's just, even if you never see the shark, or even if the ending with the shark was not satisfying, I still think it would be a great movie. But of course, we get all of that. So, James, Buttered and Salted, tell us why.
Well, it's one of those things where, I mean, this definitely is in my top 25 films of all time. It's because, and part of it, honestly, is I really love that naturalness that we were talking about. That's something that feels lost. I enjoy modern movies, and I'm not sure that an MCU movie would work if it just tried to have people be like this. But I don't know. But there's something about this type of film. I think that one thing I love about the movie is watching it now as an older old man is I really like Brody and his wife and their marriage.
Yeah,
because it's got this degree of lived in comfortability that seems very real, and seems like they don't really give us everything. Like, it's obviously not perfect, because at that one point, like, Hooper comes to the door and he's like, "I'd like to talk to your husband." She's like, "So would I."
Yeah.
It's like they have some communication problems. He has some drinking problems. And so, like, there's problems in the marriage, and yet not irreconcilable. It's not extreme. You see movies always tend to now amplify all of these things. Whether if there's some problems, it has to be an extreme problem, or it has to be. And there's such a minimalism too, where I think you get to use your imagination. Why exactly did they leave New York? You sort of vaguely get a line about, the crime was bad and didn't feel like he was making a difference. Like, with almost like one sentence, we didn't have to have the 5-minute thing where, let me explain our backstory and what it was like in New York, and have a soliloquy.
It starts monologuing. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's very little monologuing. So when somebody does, it counts. When Quint gives his speech about being on the boat, now it counts, because we haven't had so many fluff monologues that now we're just bored and we don't care. And so you actually are riveted to those moments. And there's just so many fun moments in the movie too, that just nothing really should be cut. I think it was one of your favorites too, Bridget, where the guy's on the dock. Mm-hmm. When the dock actually tears off, and it's like that. There's so many, and that has its levity and yet scary all at the same time.
Yes.
And that I don't know how he caught. Like, from 1 minute, they can have some levity on the orca, and then it turns to horror. There's this movie shifting between almost a bit of comedy and horror is a bizarre chemistry that, again, how many other films have I seen that replicated well?
Yeah.
And
and in that scene, James, I'm sorry to cut in, that
go on.
On the dock, the part that gets me, obviously, like the man having to swim back. First of all, I love that they're throwing his wife's turkey into the water to try to catch again. Like, the whole discussion about that is hilarious. So, like, you're laughing about that, but also what jumps out is just the stupidity of what they're doing as well, the pure folly of it, the greed of it. So he falls into the water and he has to swim back. And that scene gets my heart pounding every single time I watch this movie. But it's horror and hilarious in the same moment, is when you see you never see the shark in that scene. You never see the shark, but the shark has that piece of the dock stuck to him. What you see is that piece of dock do a 180 to turn to follow the guy. Sure, it's the dock. You're not even seeing the shark. You just watch a piece of wood turn and follow Like there's something just funny about that, but it's terrifying. He's in the water with a shark. So yeah, like just, to emphasize that point in that scene, the highest of hilarity to the scariest, right back and forth playing off of each other in that entire scene. It's amazing.
And so much of the dynamic on the boat is like that too. I mean, it's just, they're picking on each other, they're making jokes, and then bam, bam, bam,
Yeah.
It's jarring. And additionally, just throwing this out there, that you mentioned like these, I guess you could say the juxtaposition, right? That opening scene, James, I feel like you could weigh in on this, do you think this is where we get the trend of horror movies really leaning into it in the opening scene, and then the rest of the movie is by comparison a bit more tame? Because I feel like it's got to be one of the earlier ones where the opening scene is one of the more horrific parts of the movie. Or am I wrong about that trend?
You certainly see it in a lot of 80s movies that follow. Yeah, a lot of 50s sci-fi horror kind of stuff starts off with a little more slow burn. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that a lot of the 80s movies start with that Scream has to start with the big first kill. Mm-hmm. And things like that. So I think that probably inspired a bunch of copycat stylings in the 80s and into the 90s for sure.
Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the girl's killed right at the beginning of Halloween. So like they sort of have that opening moment of something horrific to kind of set the tone.
Yeah.
Whereas, a lot of other movies like don't necessarily start like that. They start with a little more slow burn, and they get that first thing in the first half hour. So that's a good point.
And another suspense aspect, I'm sorry, this isn't my turn, but another suspense aspect is it's such a small cast, really, in terms of named characters with lines. It's such a small cast that like there's hundreds of red shirts. Like anybody could die at any moment. Like, it's not like with most movies where you're thinking, well, they're not going to die because they have a backstory and we know about it. It's like, no, any of them could die right now. That helps with the suspense. Anyway. Sorry.
Well, and Hooper could have died, right? I mean, I think there's a very real thought that like what happens with him in the cage, and you're not like this, and he's down there. It's like the first time you see it, you're like, especially back then, I don't know if this young Richard Dreyfuss guy is going to survive or not, right?
We are past spoilers, right? We've put out the spoilers.
Yes, yeah,
oh yeah,
okay.
We're well past.
So Hooper dies in the book. He dies in that cage.
Down in the cage.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I wonder why they changed it.
And I also think there was a bit of infidelity in the book.
There was, yes.
Yeah.
Brody's wife and Hooper have an affair in the book. I think
movie's better.
Yeah, well, yes. And I honestly think maybe that's part of why Peter Benchley killed him in the book. Eliminating Hooper is what then keeps their marriage together in the book, which is awful in its own way. But but that's how the book goes. Hooper does die.
Wow. So it follows another kind of horror trope, which is that if people are having sex, doing drugs, any of that stuff, they're going to die. Mm-hmm. It's only the pure that survive.
Don't go skinny dipping, folks. That's the moral of this movie. That's my theme for the theology. No,
we'll receive that one. Yeah.
Swimming at night. Once again, I know I've got a thing with it, but it's not irrational, right? Swimming by yourself at night. Come on.
No, I think all three of us here have a fear of deep water and water we can't see the bottom of. I think that's we probably all, we have the movie's Buttered and Salted, and we share the same affliction from having seen it.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
The one craft thing I want to mention, which is something that Kat and I saw this time and actually watched a couple of videos about it, is just the fact that this young Spielberg guy has such an understanding of craft in this movie. There's an incredible one take when they talk up by the Amity sign.
Yeah.
And it is this, I think it's like a 2.5 minute, no cuts. The camera just shifts, and the camera doesn't just shift. Characters even come into the foreground and the background, depending on where they are in dominating the conversation or trying to assert themselves. And one person gets frustrated and walks out of frame, so they're no longer in the picture, and that's just the two. It's just watching. There's a couple of videos. I'll maybe link them in the show notes, but there's one in particular that just pointed out how and why that it's visually communicating everything that's happening verbally. And this amazing one take that just doesn't stop. Even there, the placement of the sign and seeing the shark fin, and as they're talking about things, like none of it's incidental. It's all moving to put everything in the foreground or the background. So that I would say next time you watch that movie, watch that scene. There's a couple other long takes too, which again we just don't see much of anymore.
Yeah.
It's neat that you get that craftsmanship in a blockbuster, because that's, talk about, again, they just don't make them like that anymore. It's rare that you get both of those things in the same package these days anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got a few guys out there that are giving us craft in blockbusters these days. Looking forward to the Odyssey next year.
Odyssey, I know, that's what I was just going to say too. Can't wait.
So let's shift and pour ourselves a little soda and get ready for some nice spiritual aspects of Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do a 180 with the doc and hit the next things. We'll go for ladies first, and not because the movie starts with a lady, because you're not going to get
Just
horribly
like this
killed.
movie.
Yeah.
Oh my.
No, I'm actually glad I'm going first on this one. So, and the reason is because my thought process about this movie has been a little bit of a mess. So I mentioned back at the beginning that I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go theologically in this portion of the discussion. And even all through the day today, I'm trying to think through things, and I had thoughts, but I was like, I don't know how to make it make sense. I don't know how to. So just bear with me on this. I'm hoping that the point will become clear as I go. But really what I want to focus on is not something so much that the movie itself is trying to say, but more so the things that were on my mind after having watched the movie. So it's more kind of like a personal tangent, I guess, than it is reading the film itself. So where I want to start is just by saying, for some reason, as much as we kind of look at this movie as the summer blockbuster and, it's frivolous fun, after watching this movie yesterday was weighing on me, like just a heaviness that I've never experienced when I have watched this movie in the past. And that I think is what was bothering me. Like, I couldn't quite figure out why this viewing felt different than other times that I've watched this movie. So here's kind of what I was trying to work through. The deaths in this movie feel, I think, so tragic because they are pointless. And we see this happen in real life so often. I think especially, maybe I shouldn't even say especially as Christians. I think it's because we are image bearers that there is an innate desire within us, inherent desire for our lives to count for something, for life to have meaning. And I think we want our deaths to reflect that as well. If we have to go out, we want to go out in a blaze of glory. We want to go out standing for something or saving someone, or, like we all have these grand, big plans for how we want that to look for ourselves. Or we at least want to have lived a life that makes that death make sense. And yet we watch this movie and the death it's so random. You have no idea, like David, you said before, you have no idea who is going to be the next victim. You see this precious 10-year-old boy get eaten, and his death is no less death than the skinny dipper at the beginning, so we have that contrast of, you see the sinners die in this movie, but you also see the epitome of what we tend to think of as innocence, the innocence of childhood, also die. And it's just so pointless. And it happens in real life all the time too. We see it with victims of violence and victims of terror attacks, and even victims of natural disasters, which has happened in Texas over the summer, and all of the natural disasters. It's not.
And animal attacks, right? I mean,
yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's not necessarily that people are doing anything wrong, but death comes when it comes. And that it was just like really weighing me down. So thinking through that, I was reminded, David, of your recent episode about Jurassic Park too, and how man's dominion was a talking point in that discussion, as it should be in those movies. The difference here being, in the Jurassic Park universe, you have these greedy, stupid people who keep thinking over and over again, let's just keep bringing those dinosaurs back. We haven't had enough of people being eaten by dinosaurs yet, so let's just keep doing it.
What could go wrong? Exactly.
What could possibly go wrong? Whereas in this movie, this is not a result of man's hubris gone wrong. And it's not like the Deep Blue Sea, where we have humans doing intelligence experiments on sharks to see how smart they can get. It's not about that. These are just normal, everyday people going to the beach, and they're dying for it. And I actually, I have this in my notes, and I promise I wrote this before the conversation we just had. But I said here, James, that Bruce might as well be the serial killer from a slasher movie. That's the way the shark in this movie is not like you see in other man versus nature movies. He's not just a pure product of nature. He is presented in this movie as an aggressor. He is presented as a hunter. He is the serial killer in shark form that we see in horror movies that come after this film. So in that way, he's a villain, right? Like you can read Jaws as a villain because he's behaving in a way he's not supposed to. So I think the Dominion part of this movie, the movie gets it right. And David, I'm not going to step on your toes. I know this is where you want to go with the conversation. But I think what Quint and Brody and Hooper do is exactly what Dominion in this movie should look like. We'll talk more about that later. So, and then another thing that was really weighing on me after this one too was the true story of the Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was younger watching this movie, I listened to Quint's speech, and I didn't know at that point when I was a kid that the Indianapolis was real, that actually happened. So it's only, as I've gotten older and learned more about history.
It seems so fictional, doesn't it? Yeah.
Like you cannot believe that actually happened to those guys, but it did. It did. That is a true story, and the estimate is that 200 of those men who went into the water were killed by shark attacks while they were waiting to be rescued. So on top of that being a true story, I don't know how many people are familiar with what happened to the captain of the Indianapolis after that whole incident happened. He actually got court-martialed and was found guilty at that time of not zigzagging properly in the submarine, which he chose not to zigzag at that time of night because there was good visibility that night and the waters were calm. So he wasn't zigzagging, but it was later proven that it wouldn't have mattered even if he did. The torpedoes would have hit the Indianapolis no matter what. But he got court-martialed. He was found guilty on that one charge. He was exonerated on a different charge. But years after that, he ended up taking his own life. And so even that, again, this senseless loss of life. He was the only submarine captain, American anyway, coming out of World War II, who was court-martialed after the loss of his ship. So he was held to a standard that was not applied to anyone else. And it feels, in some ways there's a historical miscarriage of justice in the way his name was Charles McVeigh, in the way that he was treated. So then, because of what Quint survived in the Indianapolis, but then Jaws gets him, Bruce gets him. And that really bugged me this time around. Like, come on, after, I guess, depending on your reading of the movie, you could almost look at that as like a poetic way for him to go out. But I was like, I don't think Quint wanted to go out that way. That is not like a blaze of glory death. So like that, it was just all of these things that were just,
he doesn't go down like with the grenade in his hand taking him out.
Right. Yes. And he's in pain. He's being bitten in half, like it's an awful way to go.
He's got one of the more drawn out deaths in the movie.
Yes.
Barring maybe the first girl. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the closest look we get at the shark too is in his final moments as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that to say, like that, those were the things that, like, I'm trying to think through all of this theologically. Like, all I can think about is the death and the suffering and just the sense of senselessness that seems to come from all of it. And then, so I kid you not, God moves in mysterious ways. So on my way into school this morning, I'm listening to Albert Mohler's The Briefing, his podcast. And the episode that he put out today, the topic was people who are attempting to live forever and think that this is actually I don't know if I would say scientific, but I guess maybe a technological possibility due to advances in AI. They're using phrases like downloading consciousness. I can't pretend to even understand how they think that's possible or where they think that is all going, but this is what people are attempting to do. So for anybody who's interested, I recommend Dr. Mohler's episode today just because he's pointing to a different publication and they go through the routine of this man who thinks he's going to live forever. So this, like what he does, he wakes up at 4:00 to do this, and his day is consumed by prolonging his life. It's like that circular reasoning in Equilibrium. You exist to keep on existing.
Yeah.
His whole life is consumed by it. And that's what then got me thinking. I was like, well, thank you, Lord, for that, because I feel like now I finally understand. I was so looking at the death perspective of Jaws that I was missing out on the life perspective. So after listening to that episode today, here's where I would like to go theologically. First of all, to anybody who thinks you can attempt to live forever, repent and believe, because you can't. Like that's just, you can't. It's never going to happen. I don't care what technology advances we're able to come up with. It doesn't matter. You're never going to live forever because the Bible says you won't. And that's just the end of it. So the biblical worldview teaches that we must die once. In Hebrews 9, verses 27 and 28, it says, and just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, though Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So find yourself among those who are eagerly waiting for him. So looking at this, then I was thinking that we have two choices in the way that we're going to live our lives. Someone who has literally perhaps written an entire book on this subject might refer to the two choices as life under the sun and life transcendent. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anyone here, but
that writer may have borrowed at least one of those from Ecclesiastes. Yeah.
So it is the ecclesiastical view, because that's what it comes down to here. You can either live your life knowing that you will die, but find eternal life in Christ regardless of what life here on earth throws at you. Or you can live your life knowing that you're going to die and choose to despair over your own life's meaninglessness. And that's where we get into nihilism, right? So, and I guess now apparently option number 3 is to pretend that you're not going to die, but that's not even a viable option. So I'm not going to humor that beyond that, but that's what we're left with, right? You can have, what does it mean then? So sorry, my screen just flipped off. So I wanted to make sure I was still on with you. So what does it all mean if we have this life here and we know that death is waiting for us? Then what does that mean? So what I got to thinking about then is, let us just not forget what is true about the God we serve. To whom else would we turn when we know that life is going to end in death no matter what? You either have a path of hope or you have a path of just destruction and nihilism if there is nothing to have hope in. So I wanted to point out, I won't read it all, but Isaiah chapter 40, verses 12 to 31. And then God's chapters in Job. These are parts of the Bible that just remind us how big God is. He is the creator of the entire universe. And I mean, if you just sit with that and just meditate on it for a couple of minutes, just let it stir your heart to know that everything that is true about the God of those chapters of the Bible, these things are also true of the same God. The God of Isaiah 40, 12 to 31, and the God of the chapters in Job, where he reveals himself to Job, is the same God that we see in Psalm 8. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. And let's not forget the classic Psalm 139, 1 through 16. This is a God who is universe big, but also intensely personal. The God of the universe desires a personal relationship with us. So I'll wrap it up just by saying there's a lyric in a song I really love that says, 2 wonders here that I confess, my worth and my unworthiness. And both of those things are true. We are unworthy to be called his children, yet he calls us to be his children. He takes our filthy rags and he clothes us in his righteousness. So in the end, yes, it can be difficult to carry the burdens of the flesh and the weight of our own sin nature. It can be incredibly difficult to struggle with, why does death happen? Why are these senseless events taking place? We can't make reason from it in our own human minds. But thank God that he has given us a way out. No one wants to die in a shark attack. And I would go so far as to say most people don't want to die, period. But let us, as adopted sons and daughters of the Most High God, live in such a way that we are ready to go whenever he calls us home, no matter when or how he chooses to do that. One of my other favorite podcasters, Allie Beth Stuckey, often says, and I think she might be quoting someone else, but she's the one I've heard say it, we are immortal until he calls us home. So let's run the race to win the prize of hearing our Lord and Savior say, well done, my good and faithful servant. And let us take hope in knowing that we can hear that even when it seems like the world around us makes no sense whatsoever.
Dang. Yeah.
No, that's good. I mean, I think about...
I was going to say, that's all the time we have. No, that's a good note to end on, to be honest. We could just wrap it there, but I feel like James probably has some good stuff to say too.
The traditional kind of Christian thing is that people will lead with sometimes in evangelism is like, if you died tonight, are you ready? Mm-hmm. And I think that movies like this, where you see that random, but feels like the randomness of death, even though theologically we could go down rabbit trails of providence, sovereignty, and end from the beginning and all this other stuff. But what we feel in our humanness is the randomness of these types of death. Yeah, I say we could walk out in front of a bus. It could be a bus named Bruce instead of a shark named Bruce tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so many of those, the more senseless it seems, you're just like, really? But even Christians should be thinking, okay, am I ready? Like, if I don't wake up tomorrow, is there even if I'm not worried about my salvation, should I have said something, done something, prayed something, thanked God for something? Like, how do I want to not just maybe lay down to rest, but how do I want to go to my rest?
Yeah.
And do I feel like I'm in a good place with that? That is something that, like, this movie leaves us with so many people just hanging and no sense of anything beyond the material. I think it sort of grabs that and creates a hole right there, which is kind of like what you're feeling. So that makes sense to me. And I'll pick up some Job passages here in a little bit after David.
No, that was excellent. I mean, I love the call. It's not an altar call, right? But it could just about be. No, I think that, and first of all, I did hear that briefing episode this morning as well, and that's a great tie-in.
If you need to listen to another podcast besides Popcorn Theology, Al Mohler's The Briefing is a good second best.
Yeah,
yes, yeah. The only other one.
And if he ever wants to join us, and for some reason he's listening,
that's right.
That would be great.
I'm in that episode too. I'm calling dibs on.
But yeah, I mean, I love that, like you pointed out, I mean, there's this senselessness to the deaths in this, right? It's not people who are being natural evil versus moral evil, right? When there's moral evil and there's a killer, there's a war, there's any of those kinds of things that could lead to it, that seems almost appropriate. That's a way to go out. But yeah, when there's an earthquake, when there's a tornado, when there's a shark attack, I mean, there's all kinds of horrible things. And it just reminds us more and more that this world is broken, and we all know it. And that even those who would, and I'll be one of them in a moment, to defend sharks as not mindless eating machines, but even those who might say that, okay, well, there's no morality besides that what we make for ourselves, they would look at this and say, this is a horror movie, right? This is, I mean, maybe not formally in all of the right ways, but at the sense there are horrific and evil aspects to this movie. And that just tells us that we recognize that there is something evil and awful about what's happening to these people. And this is not the way that this was initially meant to be. We live in a broken world that's going to be redeemed. And that creatures like this, while they were initially created by God, they were not created necessarily to have these types of interactions. And I hope I don't step on James's toes with this, but this shark, I think they call it a monster a few times in this movie. If you look in Genesis chapter 1 on day 5, when we see God's creation of the sea creatures, we see that he uses the word the great sea creatures. At least that's the ESV translation. Tanim is the Hebrew word, translated as dragon, serpent, whale, sea monster. And there's speculation over, could these have been real things that we attribute other names to? But regardless, there's mystery and there's darkness deep in the sea. And that broken world that we live in is going to be redeemed. And we can rest assured in that one day there's going to be the oxygen tank explosion on the broken world we live in. And so, that's super encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else you got, David?
Well, I got my whole point. I guess I can jump to that, because that actually, that's a really good segue, because ultimately, once we get past the initial setup to where we get the 3 men on the boat, we have 3 men driven by different motivations that are pulled into this adventure together. Quint is motivated by money, right? He was pushing for more money. And by the way, I looked this up because I was curious. All the people going out and doing the crazy stuff, throwing dynamite in the water and chumming all over their friends and all that, for $3,000. Part of me was like, $3,000, that's it. Like, spend more on gas for the boat. But I did look into it because I'm like, it was a different time. It was about $18,000 now. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that makes more sense now. In terms of the inflation there. But yeah, Quint is driven by money, but also a sense of adventure. There's this sort of carelessness and wildness that he has going into this. He seems to like the danger. Hooper is driven by knowledge and by wonder. I mean, he is a scientist, and he's one of my favorite scientists in movies now because of the way that he approaches this. It's a sense of wonder. Even though as a kid he saw the destructive power of sharks, he was fascinated by them. And those 2 men, I think, mirror some of the main reasons that men go into the wild, right? So people go into the wild to understand it better, some to seek money, but also just to seek adventure. Why is it that men hunt? Why is it that they go after creatures? I think that there's
glory.
Exactly, right? And so I think that there's a separate discussion that could be had just, as a character study there. But I really want to focus in on Brody, because what brings Brody onto the boat? Earlier in the movie, he says, "I'm not drunk enough to get on a boat." To which Roy Hooper says, "Yes, you are." I mean, and ultimately it's his guilt, right? That gets him on the boat. And he is, I would say, probably the most powerful scene in the movie, and I rewatched it again before we recorded, is when Mrs. Kintner walks up to him and slaps him in the face, and she's in mourning, and she's in the veil and everything, and shames him because of his lack of action. You knew and you did nothing. Oh my gosh. And the way that Roy Scheider portrays that, the way he portrays that guilt, it's so telling that he doesn't divert, he doesn't deflect. He doesn't say, "Well, the mayor here," he accepts the responsibility. Even when the mayor says,
mayor you gave me. No, wait.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he doesn't pull an Adam and Eve. And he could have made excuses, right? He would have been justified in making some of those excuses. But the truth is he knew, and he did nothing. He let the mayor pressure him. If I understand local government properly, the mayor can't tell the chief of police what to do? ? Someone tell us in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But my understanding of this is that the mayor's not in charge. He pressured the chief of police, and the chief of police, as he says other place in the movie, "I can do anything I want. I'm the chief of police." He could have closed the beaches, and he didn't. He's responsible for Alex's death. He is, and the other guy, because of what he knew. I mean, do you guys think that that's true? Do you think that he's the responsible party there? Or?
Well, he's complicit. And even if in a small town like that, the mayor could get him fired, it's still a sin of omission, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's the failure to act. That's all that's needed.
Yeah.
Good men to do nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, David, going back to that scene with Mrs. Kintner coming up to Brody, I wonder if at least part of what is motivating her, not that she deserves to feel this way, not that she should feel this way, but I wonder if she has taken some of the guilt on herself because she wanted Alex to get out of the water. And he asked her if he could go back in, and she said yes. She gave him 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
So as a mother, can you imagine you are the one who said to your child, "Yes, you may get back in the water," and then that's what ended up happening to him. So I wonder if even for her, if it's helpful to have someone else to be able to blame. And again, not that she is at fault. If anybody bears no responsibility for Alex's death, it is her.
Yeah.
But certainly she takes some of that on herself anyway. So I think there's just so much happening in that scene.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it could be that she's lashing out. And I love that this movie doesn't give us anything else in that storyline. There's no, she came back and said she was sorry later. There's no, I mean, it's just, it weighs on Brody because I think that she's right, and he recognizes that she's right. And so that leads to my hot take for the episode, which is Brody's the reason that people died. It's not the mayor's fault. It's actually on Brody for allowing that to happen. And does that mean that the mayor is innocent? No, we'll get to the mayor. But this means that the Brody's responsibility is to serve and protect, and he failed to do that. And that's why he gets on the boat. That's why he faces his fear and climbs aboard the Orca. It's to protect, because directly after this moment, Bridget, I think you mentioned this in one of our chats beforehand, the scene with him and his son. That's directly after she scolds him. He's sitting at the dinner table, and he's just kind of takes a drink, moves his hands, and his son is sitting there staring at him, you know, and copying him. That just tugged my heart, especially in the context.
And allegedly unscripted, by the way.
Really?
Wow.
That was something they caught during the story goes, that was one of those things that just sort of happened, and they kept the camera running.
Wow.
So the kid ad-libbed that 4-year-old, whatever he was, ad-libbed that?
Like, yeah, like I said, sometimes there's Hollywood stories. Well, it's like, does that story seem like it's too good to be true? Then again, I thought the Indianapolis was too good to be true, or too bizarre to be true. So
yeah. So when he says, "Give me a kiss," why? Because I need it. Was that? Do you know if that was scripted?
I have to go back, and they just apparently the copying each other thing was just something that came up.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
And that does seem like something that could happen on a set with a little kid that's bored because they're doing the lights again, and you know.
Yeah.
But that moment is just so precious because, I mean, we see him as a father who is now identifying with his child while just interacting with a grieving mother. And he says, "Give me a kiss." Why? Because I need it. I'm like, man, I can relate to that so hard now. So many movies when you watch without children, Like, it's like, yeah, that's kind of sweet. But once you have that moment where you're like, son, come here, I need it. Like, yeah, you might need this too, but really this one's for me. So very beautiful. And I think that's what strengthened his resolve to protect his family, because he failed to protect Alex. And then he's also seeking to atone, right? He is seeking redemption for the deaths that he didn't prevent. And so I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Brody the villain? Too harsh?
Well, he's not the villain. I mean, it's the Spider-Man thing, right? He fails and his uncle dies, right? He fails to act, his uncle dies. So you kind of, it's funny how you can compare it to a superhero film, but that's kind of it, right? You have somebody fail in the first or second act, and that actually becomes the spark that pushes them to the next place they need to be. And my friend, a friend who's a writer named Jim, he always says, to your Chekhov's gun thing, it's like you introduce in the first act what a character is, what their greatest fear is, and by Act 3 they're going to have to face it. So like that's one of those things where I won't go in the water. Okay, well, we know this is this is going to have to be the crucible that he has to face, and not just because he has to. Yeah, it's actually you're talking about atonement, right? You're talking about redeeming himself. So he has to take on the thing he fears most to deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the movie raises this question in a really interesting way too, because is the mayor necessarily wrong to take the financial well-being of the entire town into consideration? Now, as moviegoers, we know we're watching a movie called Jaws, so we know that he is making a bad decision. But if we could try to remove the situation from what we know to be the plot line of the movie and just take it at face value, is it necessarily wrong to say maybe this was a rogue incident and it's summertime and all of these people are going to come pouring money into this town, and without that money our town suffers? You are in a situation where you're trying to choose what are the odds that this happens again versus the well-being of the entire town. Now, I'm not trying to defend his decision, but I do think that in its own way the movie raises this complex moral gray area of we have to weigh the risks in both directions. And we see the mayor take one stand, and I think you're right. I love the way that we see the progression of Brody he goes from, which chapter is it in Proverbs? I think I have it written down somewhere in the notes. Chapter 25, maybe, about answer a fool in his folly and you'll be like him. But if you answer him in his folly, so don't answer him unless you become like him, but answer him so that you can guide him. And we see that's Brody's progression, I think, on this issue is at first he joins the mayor in his folly, and then that scene happens with his son. Yeah. And then he stops being the fool and turns that foolishness around. So it's I think that whole progression of his storyline is quite something biblically. Yeah, absolutely. And after this moment, his other son faces death and almost dies. I mean, and so back to the mayor, I agree, because it's funny because this whole thing with the mayor, the beaches are open, everything's great. I don't know if you guys have seen this much on social media, but it's kind of a meme and I've seen it in the context of COVID. I've seen it in the context of other medical stuff, of people being sort of, whenever there's a dichotomy between overcaution and, carelessness, this kind of thing comes up. The mayor from Jaws will show up and they're like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And so I think that there is a point to be made there. Yeah, this shark has probably moved on by now. Stuff like this happens, but like this whole city could go under if that were, if we were to close the beaches or something. I mean, but he's smarmy and he dresses weird and he's set up to be the bad guy, and he seems to be wealthy, and so therefore he's the bad guy and all that stuff. Yeah, but
I think the longer you live, you begin to realize, oh no, wait, there's people there's people who are honestly trying to look out for those things, because otherwise the Kittner family can't feed their kid because they went out of business. Right. Yeah. So like there is a legitimate concern on the other side of that. And even somebody panicking about fear of the water, fear of monsters in the water. And yet the leader of the town needs to stand up and say, no, we shouldn't fear this. Like in Moana, isn't he the hero? Because they're all afraid to go beyond the shallows because they're afraid of the water and afraid of the whatever. It's like, no, we need to brave those. We should not be giving into fear. We should, make the mayor Moana, and somehow we can't be afraid. We need to go beyond these shores and face these things, because that's actually what we're designed to do and be. It's like there's
storytelling is not neutral, right? I mean, when we have characters, you could write this story in a different way. I mean, it would be a lot less dramatic of a story if no one goes in the water again.
And everything was fine, and the one guy was overreacting. The end.
20 minutes in, directed by Steven Spielberg.
But notice two other things about the mayor as well. He doesn't get personally invested until his child is in the water when Alex Kintner gets attacked.
Yeah.
That's when, so they're in the hospital with Brody's son, who then saw the other man get attacked in the pond. And that's when the mayor comes in and he's like, my kid was in that water. Now I'll sign to close the beaches. But here's the other thing, too. The only action the mayor ever takes in this movie is to sign the piece of paper. He's not getting on the boat. He's happy to send 3 other guys to do that. So, and I think, I'm sorry, I just thought of one other thing with Brody, too. His fear of the water. In the scene when Alex Kintner gets attacked, did you guys notice that as soon as people become aware that there is a shark in the water, every single parent gets off of that beach and runs into the water to save their child, to retrieve their child from the water? Brody stays on the shore and yells at people to get out of the water.
Yeah.
That really struck me this time. Now, I don't know. We know that one of his sons is over in the pond. We don't know where the other one is. I don't think at that moment if he's in the water or not.
He's on the shore. I remember seeing him. Yeah.
Okay.
The little one.
Okay.
He's like playing in the sand. Yeah.
Okay. That's right. Yes. Yeah, they do show him later then.
Yeah.
But either way, Brody does not go in the water at that point. Every single other person does, and he does not. So even then, I don't know if it's his fear of the water. I don't know if it's shock at what he just witnessed, but it takes until the mayor finally signs the paper, until Brody realizes what his son is witnessing over in the pond, before Brody even is finally willing to be the one to go in the water and take action about what's going on.
Yeah. And I love, speaking of the fear of the water, to James's earlier point, I love that this movie doesn't give us exposition on everything. We don't get a 5-minute backstory with flashbacks of why he's afraid of the water. He just is afraid of the water. Like, that's okay. We as an audience are okay with that level of like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because we all do now after watching this. So
exactly.
Yeah. There's a mention that he had. Just a mention that he had a bad experience, and that's it.
That's all you need. Exactly. We don't need a whole, prequel out of that.
This is why blockbusters like this were 2 hours or less back then. But now they're 2.5 because unnecessary exposition.
Exactly. Right. Never a character gets a backstory. The mayor gets the whole thing. But ultimately, both the mayor and Brody are leaders. And that's something that I think, has to be taken into consideration. And that's what I really walked away from this viewing with, which is, what does it look like to lead well? And is Brody a good example of leadership? I mean, I think that there's, to the question of, is Brody the villain? I mean, not exactly, but if there's a lack of action, that is still a moral decision, right? To quote Rush, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, right? James 4:17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. I'd like to call that the Uncle Ben verse, right? It's great power comes great responsibility. Or Matthew 25, right? So the separating of the sheep and the goats, when the Lord says, depart from me because I was thirsty, you didn't give me anything to drink. I was in prison, you didn't visit me, all of this stuff. He says, because you did not do it to the least of these, my brothers, you didn't do it unto me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. I mean, there's a real case to be made for the importance of action versus inaction. Not careless action, because we're also held accountable for carelessness. Matthew 12:36 and 37 tells us that we'll be held accountable for every careless word or deed. But what I love about Brody is that he is responsible for what happens because he's the leader. It's not because no one else pressured him. To quote A Bug's Life, the first rule of leadership, everything is your fault. He accepted that, right? He said, yeah, I'm in charge here. Leaders are meant to watch over our safety. And Hebrews 13:17 tells us that they are keeping watch over your souls. Spiritual leaders are held to an even higher standard. Luke 17:1-2. And because of the deep watery consequences, I just have to read this one. He said to the disciples, temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea than that you cause one of these little ones to sin. And so we see that there's the moral aspect to it as well. But there's, leaders are held to a higher standard, basically, is what this comes down to. And so the mayor, is this all faultless? Is he faultless in this? Of course not. All of this could be said about him too. But Brody is there to provide that check. He's supposed to stand up for the people and to do what is right. And so he seeks to atone. That's why he goes out on the boat. And that's why I think it's why it's so important that he gets the big hero moment. If Quint had jumped in with a grenade, I think that would have very much cheapened the story. I think Brody needed that because I need it, right? To quote him from earlier. And, of course he can't atone for sin, right? We need Christ because we cannot truly atone for our sin, but he accepts responsibility. He recognizes he's accountable. instead of pulling an Adam and Eve and deflecting. And so I love this as a example of godly leadership, of accountability. And ultimately, we could look at this the other way too, which is that his actions on that boat by killing the shark saves so many lives as well. That lack of action earlier cost lives. Proper action saves lives. Not Quint's, unfortunately, but other lives. So anyway, just struck me as a helpful case study in that. But any other thoughts on the leadership angle?
No, it ties in. I mean, I think that absolutely the film is communicating. You've got a town being operated by all the different officials. And I wouldn't have thought of phrasing it. I don't know if anybody would watch the movie and come away thinking, oh, that's a leadership study. But they know you're looking at the top, you're looking at the sheriff, you're looking at the mayor, you're looking at the people who are in power. It's like, how are they wielding that power and whether they're doing it poorly or not, and what power they have over this force of nature. So it is really a study on a few different fronts about it's that dominion aspect. And also then, just because we may be entitled, have the title of having dominion, are we actually doing that role properly? And balancing it between nature and our responsibilities to one another. So that's actually pretty, I wouldn't have thought of it's a leadership lesson, but it totally is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love too that it's more than one person involved. I like that you're drawing out that point too, Dave, because who knows what we would do individually. You can still be a coward or a hero individually, but then you bring someone else in and you have to run your decisions by that person and you feel like you're governed by that person. And really, I mean, I guess in a way what we see here is an image of bureaucracy and how red tape can end up costing lives, So there's a lot to unpack there. I think that leadership angle is a really interesting one to pull out. That was really good.
Yeah. Well, James, I think that you're going to bring us home on this one, right?
Sure. Well, but what's funny is we've talked about how this film is, in one sense, simple and focused. And so like mine actually is going to grab at various similar pieces of yours. In fact, Job was a very prominent theme. You were just a chapter before me. But as I was thinking about this film, there's a very much, the leadership lesson or different things. I think my original take, as I was preparing for another talk on it with a church gathering where we watched it this year, was you look at the film, you could just take the people as archetypes, right? You have greed in the mayor. Or you have Brody has fear, or you could look at highlights sort of different character traits, and you could pick out sins across the board that are unique to each one: greed versus fear versus just foolishness, Quint's arrogance. You could try to assign different fears, but as I begin to really think about it, actually, Jaws evokes, I think, a primal fear, and the whole theme, ultimately, everyone's sin, everyone's fault, and everyone's folly is coming out of fear. You can look at the film, too, and think it's just a man versus nature, but to your point earlier, Bridget, Jaws is given it to us as something as higher than, there's something odd about this shark. It's sort of beyond nature in a way. So I think it actually does appeal to a more divine level of fear in which Jaws actually reflects death, and because of some characters' poor choices, it's death and damnation. Right? There's some randomness with things like the poor girl at the beginning or Alex Kittner, but for Quint, for other people, it's like, oh, there's actually almost as if there is some judgment coming on the town and certain characters. And it's something we see God alluding to. Like when it comes to fear and looking at creatures, Job 41 talks about the Leviathan. You talked about Genesis, David, and we talked about this in our Godzilla episode a while back, but it's worth re-mentioning with this film because it's right there the same way, right? You even listen to some of the verses as God's describing this creature. It says, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? And then it says, lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. And then it goes on to say, behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. And then just for a perfect description of Jaws, it says, who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror.
I hate to interrupt, James. Could you maybe reread that in Quint's voice? Oh, that'd be so perfect in that monologue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If we could get the right Robert Shaw AI to... No.
There we go. Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Yeah, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I could just hear it. It's great.
Who can open the doors of his teeth?
Yeah.
His face.
Those eyes.
His teeth is terror.
Those eyes.
Still delivered the bomb. No, this movie to me, across the board for all the characters, is just an exercise in fear, which is base to human function and reality and what underlies all of us. And I think, as you guys already mentioned it in passing here and there, so you already knew about the Jaws effect, right? Even beyond the movie, this has created a paranoid fear in people. There was a whole bunch of shark killings that were unnecessary. There were several great whites almost were hunted. They were worried about extinction. So there were shark attacks. In fact, the book was based loosely on a 1916 New Jersey shark attack, but the movie's depiction isn't accurate, right? So you have this idea of these terrible, horrible, lurking fear that's almost beyond reality. And so to me, it represents something much higher. I think it's the sum of human fear, and it tests all the different characters in various ways. So like it tests Brody's fears, fear of the water, fear of shark, his fear of man issues, because he gives in to the persuasion of the town, fear for his job, even if not being directly attacked, he knows he could start to get a bad perception in town. And that's why I think the mayor, it's too easy to call him just the greedy guy.
Right.
Because no, he's got fear too. As to your point, businesses might go under, people might lose their homes. If I make this decision, what about my reelection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a people pleaser. He's a mayor. And he's also kind of he's in self-denial because he's afraid. And Hooper, of all things, even he's actually fascinated. And I know he's a student of all things shark, but when the head rolls out from the boat, we see him scream like a little girl. And then, of course, we see him in the cage, right? I mean, like that, he falls apart. He swims and hides, right? So there's this test of fear for everybody. And Quint too, right? Yes, there's pride in Quint. Yes, there's arrogance in Quint. He smashes the controls. Idiot, right? That he's got obsession. He's got Ahab issues. He's got vengeance. But all that self-assurance is a mask, right? It's insecurity and fear. It's the classic bully thing. And we see it in the World War II story. Deep down, he's terrified. He's like, I'm never wearing a life jacket again. I'm not going to be in that position where I'm just waiting to be shark food. And when he gets bit, like he screams like a high-pitched child.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it is not a noble death at all. And so it's like everybody's fear is being exposed by this problem of the shark, either directly or indirectly. And everybody but Brody kind of comes up wanting. I think the movie is just sort of indirectly asking that question: how do we overcome fear? Even Ellen Brody looking in the magazine, right? She's like, oh, it's okay. Let him play in the boat. It's right there at the dock. And then she looks at the pictures. Get out of there. Right? It's the fear of death. It's fear for our loved ones. It's that question that you were talking about, Bridget, of how can I ultimately overcome my inevitable end? And so the movie shows us different tactics. Like people do try to stave it off. Like, well, how do I stave off inevitable death? Well, I try to warn people, steer clear of some, we put smoking, ads on smoking that says it's hazardous to your health, it can cause cancer. Like we try to steer people clear of it. We do our best to avoid it. We don't go in the water. We avoid risk taking. Like Hooper in the cage, we build cages, metaphorical cages, or we just wear a helmet when we ride a motorcycle, right? We actively take steps to avoid it or combat it or confront it. And that's what the hunters do. That's what Quint and Brody do. But ultimately, I get that Brody wins. But if we think about just Jaws as the specter of death, that's only a temporary reprieve. So that's why horror movies, which is why I think it is a horror movie, even though it's a PG horror movie, and I think it's tugging at our souls and here's where I think that the movie, you saw Jaws as a villain. I might throw a monkey wrench in that a little bit, Bridget.
I deserve it. It's okay.
Sure. There you go. Well, Romans 1 said, I'll just bottom line it. Jaws reminds me of God. Because that's what the Leviathan and Job is supposed to be doing. Romans 1 says, for what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. Now, I know when we normally think of what that verse means, like when we talk about God's attributes, we see God in creation. What do we all generally think of?
The beauty of
like mountains,
Yeah.
a beautiful river, a beautiful landscape.
Providence, provision, things like that.
Thomas Kincaid paintings.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we think of. Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, sky proclaims his handiwork. And so we always put it to like beautiful mountains, majesty, amber waves of grain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually serene.
Yeah.
But I think Romans 1 is telling us his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. If we go back to Job, he's talking about the fear of the Leviathan. And he actually says, no one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? He's like, I'm bigger and more terrifying than the Leviathan. I mean, that's what he's telling Job. And that outside of grace, 100% true. Even when in Romans 1, we read that he's revealed in creation, that's what it says. It starts to talk about that in verse 19. But verse 18 says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Jaws should remind us of God and how we're confronted by him. When we're confronted by God, we're tested and our fears are tested, even more so than the people of Amity. It's like, what do we fear and why? You take a look at the mayor again. He suppresses the truth. And we know it's from some unrighteous methods, right? We're supposed to think he's kind of smarmy and bad. Right? His denial leads, and what does this denial do? It leads other people into a water without fear, without a proper and needed fear. He's like the atheist telling people there's no God and no day of judgment. Oh, just go in the water, it's fine. Go in the sinful water, you'll be fine. Like, no, that type of person is actually not giving us the proper fear of God that we should have. Or you look at Quint, he's the arrogant man, and he will be laid low. Like in the final day of reckoning, he's screaming. And even Hooper, like Hooper maybe has knowledge in science, but as Quint points out, he has city hands. You got city hands, boy. Like he has a lot of knowledge about this thing of which he should be afraid of, but he's not actually equipped to deal with it. Like his cage falls apart, his things fall apart. I guess they do use his tank, but not in the way it's supposed to be used at the end.
Yeah.
Right? Just like we can know about God and we can actually want to learn and know a lot of things about God, but then that doesn't mean like the demons believe, like, but are we spiritually equipped to stand in the day of judgment before him? And we know we don't do that by our own power. We don't build a cage. We don't shoot a tank, but there's a way that we need to be in right relationship and we need the grace of God to stand. There's a certain way that we can approach God without fear, who is more terrifying than Jaws. And you've already talked about it, David. Brody's complicit too. Sin of omission, letting himself be silent, not closing the beaches, right? He should have been preaching, turn around, repent from the beach, come back. He should have been, just like we as Christians should be. Why are we silent? Is it people pleasing? Is it our job? Is it our standing? Like we're supposed to be telling people, get out of that sinful water, get out of the sinful water. There is something terrifying at the end of this, and it is a God who will righteously judge. Like there is this terror, and you are swimming in it, swimming in sin, and not actually thinking about what could bite you. that's
Yeah.
So in some ways, Jaws reminds me of the very real Hebrews 10:31 kind of God. Like it's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. That's right there in our scripture. It's the part that maybe we don't say enough on Sunday. We always start with God loves you. It's like in our sin, facing God is going to be more scary than facing Jaws. That we do not want to be there. Jesus says that too. Jaws is nothing. Jesus says, don't fear the one who can kill the body, but can't kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Like that's way worse than Jaws. But what's awaiting you if you're not in Christ is worse than Jaws. So I think that when Jaws sort of takes on an almost supernatural, non-normal shark component, I start thinking about that. What is that ultimate fear? What happens when I die? What is that going to look like? What am I going to be facing? That's where I think, of course, what do we need? We need a bigger boat, right? We don't have anything in our power. We need a bigger boat. And I think that it's kind of funny biblically, right? If God gives us what we need to escape, and in fact, one early archetype of that is a boat, the ark.
Right.
How does he save in one of the first and earliest places we see in scripture? He redeems people by putting them on a big boat. He saves them. And that's why, and with Christ, he provides a vessel of grace and mercy that is not going to fall apart like the orca, that will safely protect us from righteous judgment. But the funny thing is, he's the captain of the orca and he's the tooth-filled judge. So I mean, like God he's both. He's provided both things. There is justice and wrath for those outside of his grace who are swimming in sin, and there are those who can seek grace and righteousness in the boat. And that's why Christians herald our Savior. That's why John the Baptist tells people, get out of the water, right? He heralded Jesus. Be baptized. I guess get into the water.
Yeah, get into the water.
John the Baptist, get into the water, get into the water. You're in danger. You're in your sins. This isn't safe. So I think for some of us, we have that moment like Brody on the beach where it becomes real. I love the way the camera work there, just the way that sort of the fisheye lens pulls back and you have like his perspective is shifting. And at some point we realize, oh my gosh, the danger's real. Sin is real. I'm in trouble. I need help. These jaws of death are real. And is there any escape? Like that's supposed to drive us to a proper fear of God. And then of course, know the love of Jesus, which drives out fear. Like that's the cool conundrum of the cross, or the sort of the enigma that sometimes we wrestle with in our heads. Like, okay, wait, I'm not really fearing Satan. Like Jaws isn't equivalent to Satan. Like actually the most terrifying thing is God himself. And the only thing that will save me is God himself.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, So Brody actually saves the town, and maybe even Brody in some way takes on that kind of leadership and Christ-saving moment for the town. But when I think of Jaws, I don't necessarily think of the villain. I think Jaws reminds me of God. Or reminds me that I should be mindful of God. Because Jaws or the bus or whatever actually takes me out in this life is not really the thing that should have the most gravity or the most weight in terms of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
That's why. So both Jaws and Godzilla and that Leviathan, that's why God ends there. He's like, okay, let me explain how these things should terrify you. Now understand, they ain't got nothing on me.
Yeah.
Like King Kong ain't got nothing on me. That's our God.
Yeah.
But we don't have to fear that God because of the gospel. So that's that strange dichotomy in which we don't have to die. We can have eternal life.
Yeah.
All of these things work together. I'm not actually proving your point wrong, Bridget, but they're just different ways of slicing the frame and looking at this from angles that help us get back to our faith.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, I love too. I mean, so, this notion of fear, right? So what does it look like to fear God? Because my whole life, people would say, fear the Lord. And then they would just like almost breathlessly. Now, that doesn't mean we need to be afraid of him. Like, there was this tendency to just like, it says fear, but it doesn't mean fear. And it's like, maybe it should mean fear, because the word fear in the Bible refers to God a lot. And it's that cold fear. But I can't help but, think of, Aslan, right? In Narnia. He's not a tame lion. You don't want to be on his bad side. And, not to mix too many metaphors, but, Lion King, right? When Timon and Pumbaa find him, it's, wait, what if he was on our side, That's the big thing, is that you don't want Aslan mad at you, but you want him on your side. And ultimately, it's funny, you mentioned the ark earlier, because the verse that came to mind, Matthew 24, 36 through 44, I'll just read part of the passage. This is referring to Christ's return, right? Concerning the day and the hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day the Lord is coming. But know this, the master of the house, if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour you do not expect. And so there's the horror verses in Revelation, right? Of, blood up to the horse's bridle, Jesus with a sick tattoo on his leg, and a sword and a robe dipped in blood. But ultimately, I think that's one of the more chilling passages, because people were laughing. They were feasting at weddings. They were the equivalent to hanging out on the beach with their family on the 4th of July, right? Sandcastles, having fun, letting their kid go back in for 10 more minutes. And all of a sudden, death came up. I mean, and it does seem that there's no shortage of reasons to fear the one who can take your life and your soul, send you to hell. And so, that fear aspect, of course, is not the sole motivator, but of course, that is the key thing, is that we must recognize the proper place of that fear. So I love that. That's fantastic.
Which does tie it back. Also, then, that's sometimes why the slasher or the serial killer and say Jason and some of the other movies, sometimes they seem to be getting the campers who are sinning. They seem to be there is almost sometimes the slasher or serial killer or the villain. I mean, admittedly, in those stories, they are the villain. I'm not disputing that Jaws he serves that role as well. But sometimes there is that, what is it supposed to be reminding me of? Oh, these kids were fornicating and now they're killed. In some weird way, the villain actually is supposed to stoke our minds to think about, what about that final day? What about that? Yeah. What about my final fate? Somehow even villains should still point to remind us in a lot of these situations to think about that final day, and if there's something more terrifying to face, or if there's something very wonderful to face that says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Mm-hmm. That's where we want to hear that. We want to be paddled into the shore like Hooper and Brody and be welcomed with joy. Like that's where we want to end. So speaking of ending, we should probably have our lightning round and wrap things up and make sure we cover any dangling points, either from what we've already said or some things we want to receive, reject, redeem. So are there things we want to make sure we walk away from this movie experience and review saying, let's throw this out? Or is there some stuff that you think is also tweakable or receivable?
Well, one we've already talked about. I think we can reject that sharks are mindless eating machines. Instead, these are creatures that were made in the image of God, trying to fulfill the command, which was actually first given to the sea creatures to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. So, respect sharks, that
They're
kind
like
of
first.
thing, got to throw that one out there. And of course, the general disregard for danger, as we've already talked about, I think that's a reject point for sure. There's reason to be cautious. What about you, Bridget? Any reject points?
Well, first of all, can we reject that I said that this movie is carbonated? Go ahead and change that right over to a cup runneth over.
Hey, all right.
Oh, okay.
The theology section has been fantastic. I mean,
No,
both of the
fun.
points were just incredible. So I feel like I sat through a Sunday sermon. Like that was awesome. So thank you for that.
There's movies that like they pour out, and then there's movies where it's like you got to dig, but once you dig and you strike oil, like, oh man, there's a lot there. Just you had to dig for it, and this is one of those.
Yeah.
I think.
We thought we'd just find a fish and a license plate, but it turns out there was a whole lot in there.
Well, and kind of along the lines, and I think, as a Christian podcast, I feel like I need to mention how many times the Lord's name is taken in vain in this movie. It happens quite frequently. Only to then later have, I think it's Hooper, who refers to the great white shark as a miracle of evolution. I was like, man,
Wait a minute.
what an interesting way to phrase that.
Miracle.
Yeah. Right.
A miracle
Right.
of natural processes. Wait.
The God whose only purpose is for you to put his name in your mouth to use whenever you want for any purpose, but he divinely didn't create the sharks. Evolution divinely, miraculously did. So, in that moment, this movie's kind of all over the place in its theological talking point. But I think, obviously reject using the Lord's name in that way, only to then credit his creation to some other mechanism. So that would be a reject point for me.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got?
Yeah, as far as most of my points were receive/redeems. And so one, we've already talked about this a bit, is that sin has consequences, right? And that we see horror movies are really good at kind of bringing about those consequences, like, the girl at the very beginning and the guy who, fortunately for him, passed out on the beach. And while I guess they didn't sin, they were, to quote Delmar from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, the two of them was fixing to fornicate. So there's that. Yep. Another receive point is just this beautiful picture. We've already talked about the family, right? That Chief Brody's family is just, him and his wife. We have a loving and protective father. We have a sweet and supportive mother, and kids that, for the most part, honor their parents when they're not, messing with shark fins and screwing with people. We have a sweet picture of godly manhood and womanhood. I love that. Yeah, I also think that there's an innate aspect of this movie that we can relate to. There's a impulse for justice, right? So we want justice. And to your earlier point, we want justice because we recognize wrath, and we want that wrath poured out on the people for whom it is deserved. And while I know this twists the metaphors around a bit, right? So we've got Jaws, which I assume his name is Jaws, the shark. Hello, my name is Jaws. That he is both an image of the wrath of God, but in a sense, he's also the villain. And I just can't help but think of, the notion of natural evil, like we talked about earlier. It's that if you are recognizing that this should not have happened, we could make excuses, and some do. Oh, there's no universal morality. The world is just dog eat dog, right? Red in tooth and claw, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we recognize that even when it's not a human taking a life, that blood has to be paid for blood. That's Genesis 9. That's part of the Noahic covenant, is that when man takes another man's life, his life is forfeit. The same applies to animals. It's actually described in Genesis 9, but expounded on in Exodus 21, verse 28. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held. Oh, hold on. I don't have the other verse. Hold on. Basically, there's another verse that I forgot to put in here that states that if the owner knew that this was a wild animal, then they're held to greater accountability, which again ties back to you knew and you did nothing, and now my son is dead. Anyway, so those are a couple of my receive/redeem points. Bridget, James, anything?
My receive was also based on the family and the marriage that we get. I just love that it's a flirtatious marriage. I just think that's really cute. We don't see that very often. Even if you see a healthy marriage in movies these days, a lot of times it feels like it's out of duty or we're keeping it together for the kids. It's just really nice to see a married couple who seem to have been married for a while and they just really like each other. In addition, it's like the love in Parks and Rec. I love you and I like you.
And I like you. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this movie really gets that in that relationship. So that's a receive.
It's like the Jim and Pam of monster movies, if you will.
Yeah,
nice.
That's great. Yeah, one of my last point, if you will, in the receive redeem column was the importance of friends. Right, we got Hooper coming into town, and we've got Brody, and they become friends really quickly. Like it seems like they're going to be at odds, but no, not at all. Brody comes in after that awful day. How was your day? And they both laugh. As Hooper just brings this levity to all of these situations and
eats his food.
Yeah, he just starts eating.
It's just makes himself at home. Love it. But then, especially his relationship with Quint, like he and Quint should be at each other's throats the whole time. And if this movie were made today, I think they would be. I don't think that they would have had that candor, I guess is maybe the word I'm looking for, where, Quint shotguns the beer and then crushes it. And then Hooper drinks his little paper cup of water and crushes it back. I love it. They're back and forth. They're comparing scars and stories and all of that stuff. I'm just reminded of Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. And two are better than one. They have a good reward for their toil, all of that stuff. And this last part falls apart a little bit. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. There's 3 men on the boat, but that cord did break. Not the best metaphor there, but we see that these relationships are tried in the fire. And I find that is very much the case with friendships in this world. We need them, and they tend to form not in the hilltop moments, but in the valley moments, in the deep, in the danger. So yeah, I just love that picture of friendship as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, the 3 of us survived this episode without any
hopefully our
shipwrecks.
listeners did too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I don't know that we could ever do this movie, this 50-year-old celebrating anniversary movie, justice with even an hour and a half, or even 2 hours. So it's one of those things where there's so much more to know about this film and enjoy about this film. I hope our listeners definitely chime in and let us know everything that they loved that we missed in terms of talking about, and maybe some other theological points, since it does seem to be running over a little more than we may have anticipated. So Bridget, David, thanks again for being on this episode and talking all things Jaws.
Thank you, guys. This was great.
Yeah, this is fun.
I'll throw in my plug for Jaws 2. Again, just worth watching just to see even what happens to Brody after, and a little bit more of the marriage, which we seem to enjoy. So even just for that, there's some things we might want to watch. But be sure to like this episode and share again, and let people know that they can watch these and more episodes on other movies that they love. And until next time, show me the way to go home. I'm tired and I want to go to bed, because I've been podcasting about an hour or so, and it's gone right to my head. Wherever you may roam, or land or sea or foam, you are not a mindless consumer, so show me the way to go home. There we go. Everybody.
Farewell and adieu to you fair movie lovers. Farewell and adieu, you theology nerds. So share and subscribe, review and support us, and we hope in a week's time to see you right here.